But if you are clear this lifetime about being the self, about being the Atman, and you pass from this body with a clear mind, then you will have a field of choice, that you have the power enough to select it and remain with it. Not much different than life. People see something they like in life, they choose it, and they get distracted from it. It's just the same here. So just think about that, this is saying anything that here is appearing in the world is pretty much mirrored in spiritual life, or vice versa, depending on which side you're coming from. So you would want to choose your parents. And it's true, they say some, like Babaji Bob there has said before that she's worked with a lot of people and dying people and so forth, and they've already left the body long before the body dies, and so they've already chosen their next lifetime. They're already set up for their next lifetime. And quite often that's not a good thing if the mind isn't clear about spiritual matters. That's why Dharma is so important for us, to make sure that our mind is clear before we exit this body. I hear we're back online, is that true? Yes. So, sorry for the 5 minutes interruption to those of you who are watching. You had a few questions while you were gone, and you can come to be with us at satsang for those questions if you want to ask them. And in the meantime, now we segue back into this topic of discrimination, viveka in Vedanta, or false superimposition. It applies very well to the result of it. Lack of discrimination is samsara, life in samsara, and we started out the class yesterday about that. This march of events that we get sucked into and we consider it to be real, and then we'll go through our whole life considering these things to be real, and these people to be real, these events and things that happen to us to be real. But it's very rare to see a person who is detached to that whole line of events. It doesn't matter to them whether 400,000 people die in a tidal wave. They'll just salute and say 400,000 ego bubbles popped and returned to the ocean of awareness. See, that's ultimately what happened. So there's no loss and there's no gain, either in life or in spiritual life. As in spiritual life, of course, Krishna has told us that he who practices even just a little bit of this yoga is saved. If you practice just a little of my yoga, he says, you'll be saved from the ocean of suffering. So, we were talking yesterday about Buddha's story about Dharma bucket, drops in the Dharma bucket, one of his teachings. But there's rain falling everywhere, see. But most of it's falling, watering weeds and sewers, gutters, see. But if you have a bucket, you can catch a little bit of that, see. So that's how much practice you do. So if you meditate once a day, if you read the scriptures daily, do your worship in front of the altar and so forth, and do your karma yoga properly, then you're catching Dharma bucket drops every time you do that. And when there's a drought everywhere, you've got this, depending on how much practice you did, you've got this amount of water you can drink. See? In other words, those events mean a great deal to your life. All the other events mean nothing. All the other raindrops that fell in your life everywhere, they actually amounted to nothing in the end. And nobody can even count them, or what to speak of assess them. You know. In fact, some of them may have been negative drops. So these ones that you collect inside of the mantle of your practice, those will benefit you. And so then false superimposition will apply there. Apply at birth, it'll apply in your devotions, so you make sure you're not loving the ego, but you're loving God. It's a very good teaching. My teacher once said, here in the West and in Christianity, they are talking about the soul. But that's not the soul they're worshipping, that's the ego. Let me put it much clearer, rather a slap in the face. But if you look at people, they're worshipping egos, either theirs or someone else's. And who loves God? I mean, you'd have to see someone like Sri Krishna to know what a lover of God looks like. owning nothing, in ecstasy all the time, giving away everything to the Divine Mother of the universe, full of wisdom. I mean, there's signs. But do you see those signs in these egos you love? Do you see those signs in yourself? So, that's not the soul we're worshipping, that's the ego. So that's the idea in Bhakti. You have to make sure what you're loving is God. If you enter into the Bhakti path and you dance and sing with affectation and so forth, and you go to put nice clothes on and go to kirtans and you go to asana class and all this, and you find out one day it's just all mucking about with the ego and others' egos. But you never had one tear for God. You never really wanted God. You might have told yourself, I want God, I want enlightenment. But as soon as freedom came close, you went running the other direction with your tail between your legs. Because freedom is a great responsibility. Doesn't have to do with happiness and sorrow and so forth. That which is sweet in the end turns painful. The sweet in the beginning turns painful at the end. That you don't want, you see. But what's painful in the beginning and turns sweet at the end, that you want. What's painful in the beginning is working on yourself. Well, I think I'll work on myself now. I'm really going to make a change here. Guess what? I gave up coffee for a week. As if coffee was bad to begin with or something. But you never worked on your mind, which is the gateway to your soul. You thought the body, if you worked on the body, somehow that would make you better. But you didn't even know about the prana that's flowing through the body and how to master that. You can't master the mind without mastering the prana. The prana operates the thoughts, not only in the waking state, but in the dream state. So, again, some deep dharmic teachings that will wake us up to our predicament in Maya. We have people saying, oh, there's no danger, you're always talking about Maya and this and that. There's no danger anywhere, but these are the very people that are sitting there like fish at the bottom of the lake with a net in their mouths, thinking they're safe. That's Sri Krishna put it. You know, fisherman casts his net. There's 4 kinds of fish. You know, one goes, sinks itself into the mud and thinks I'm safe, but it's actually got the net in its mouth. So that's the person caught in Maya who hasn't awakened up to the predicament of name and form without discrimination. That's why I love this teaching almost the best of one of my very famous teachings, Lord Vashishta, an overall teaching that is very suitable for the teaching on discrimination. Or maybe it wasn't on this chart. But it had to do with that discriminative knowledge, the 2 kinds of births. Oh, there it is. The primary disease of the world is desire for rebirth. That's the disease of the mind. The desire to be reborn, according to the seers, is a disease. To your parents, it was zest for life. To the seers, it's a disease. You do not want to go in there. See, it's a statement, right? Somebody just used the bathroom before you and they come out and say, you do not want to go in there. Well, that's the world to the seers. This 2 weeks ago, Swami wrote me and said, you know, Babaji, the world is just a huge hole in the ground. I mean, they don't have any doubt about it anymore. All the seers want you up and out of the body. And unless what? Unless the secondary disease of the mind is reincarnation devoid of discriminative wisdom. So they give you a concession here. There's 2 choices. Either don't be born at all or come back with discriminative wisdom. And then you're safe, you see, and then you can help others wake up from this dream. This horrible dream in this old witch, the world. Swamiji says, old witch, the world. See, he says. Then on another statement he says, it's a gymnasium, the world. Just flex your muscles and get out. with these people who spend all their time in the gymnasium, almost as bad as spending their time in the toilet someone just used. See? Same smell, you see. You want up and out of that, and the fresh air of the spirit, don't you? Do you want this freedom? Don't you desire freedom at the root of your being? And the more you taste the world, the more you think it's like a hog plum. Ramakrishna said, the world is like a hog plum. What's that? Hog plum's this little withered little fruit, see? You pick it, and you take the skin off it, and there's very little meat, and then most of it's seed, see? Very little meat, and if you eat the meat of that, you get indigestion. I should make a chart on that. I think I will, actually. You'll see a hog plum chart pretty soon. And so, the point here, I mean, again, criticism and fault finding and all that, but then there's a stark truth you have to look at if you're somebody of sterling character, somebody who wants to awaken, if you're a sincere seeker, and if you want to know the truth without any coverings, see, false superimpositions, then you'll have to hear these things and measure them into your own life. And of course, for the monk it's going to be, the game's over, all over, it's over and done with. I'm not coming back here again. I took a canoe to a distant island, and I burned a canoe as soon as I got there. So even if I thought of coming back, I'm not going to do it. It's a done deal. And then you have, a whole strata of human beings who are here for different reasons. Some on a divine mission, others to fulfill a few desires, and then they can get free. Because desires are pretty much at the root of everything. We read that in the chart yesterday. And you have some who are just bound head and foot, like the net in their mouth, into the world and can't get free, bound to their ancestors. And then you have those that don't even know they're bound. They won't even think of God even by accident. Who said that?
Sri Ramakrishna.
Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa said, most people won't even think of God even by accident. And it's not philosophically, religiously, or politically correct to say God anymore. It's not in the schools or almost anywhere else. You won't have any friends on Facebook if you use the word God. Those 500 friends that are running to you. So Vivekananda had a very interesting statement about that. He said, I'll go and speak with anyone. The spiritual, the religious, the worldly, the intellectuals. We need to be able to go and speak with them all about this doctrine that will save them from Maya. But if I had my druthers, if I had my preference, I would speak and be with only people who believe in God. So it just like tore the covering off of it. So I only want to be with religious people. And he's talking true religious, not false religion. Not hypocrites. Because he was born and raised spiritually amongst 15 brothers who were of that quality. This is the Ramakrishna order and why it came millions of people strong in just a short amount of time. So he used to say that. He said, we were just 15, 16 little young men, you see, 12 maybe. There were a few of the older disciples there, but we were just little young men after Sri Ramakrishna died. Our parents wanted us to come home and give up thinking about Sri Ramakrishna, give up the thoughts of monasticism. This is in India, 1800s. But the Master had given us all one thing. See, there were lots of religious groups around us who wanted to squelch us, didn't want another upstart, monastery growing up in the neighborhood, you see. They wanted to have all the Brahmin priests wanted to have all the followers, you see. So they looked very askance down their noses at these young boys who were idealistic. So, but Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda at that time wasn't named that, it was Narendra, said, but Sri Ramakrishna had given us one thing, the knowledge of how to live a spiritual life, to actually live it, not just profess it, not just pretend it, not just to do it conventionally, or hide behind a shelter of it, but to actually live a spiritual life. That's why you feel the sincerity in his words. You read the books that have come out about him, and you know that he's the line of Vedanta and so forth, because it's all authentic. There's nothing untoward or insincere in it, or in any of the direct disciples of Ramakrishna. Remember, Sri Ramakrishna was virtually unknown in his lifetime, just known by a little circle in Bengal. And now look at him. 6 million people follow him in a very short time. Even with Jesus, it took the Crusades and all this war and everything to become known. Marched by the sword, and the popes getting on horses with swords and armor. What kind of a holy person is that? Killing. So non-violence has been the foundation of India. Non-violence, not violence. You see, warlike, domineering violence, that's the very first and worst of the occult powers, if you get caught in that. So, before I spend all the time with my own thoughts here on all of this and various things, we should go on and finish this Upanishad, which we will, because there's only 5 slokas left. Anyway, that point comes home. Number 1, first disease of the mind, the desire to be reborn again and again. Sure, have a lifetime, see what's here. And then assess it, see that it's a hard plumb and give it up. See? Or come back with Viveka, discriminating wisdom. If you come back with that, you'll be safe here. You'll be all right. And your lifetime will amount to something. You'll find meaning in your life, as it were. It's not that God has a purpose for your life, because God's beyond life. God's eternal life. God's not looking in on you. He's a transcendent. It's a transcendent reality. And you have to raise yourself to it. Vivekananda said, you can't bring God down to the world. You won't come here. You have to raise yourself up to God, to Brahman. And that's your doing. It's your sadhana. So those 2 things are a great teaching around Viveka. Now let's take sloka 16 then, because that was a review of 15 in this chart. 16, he, with a capital H again, is the creator of everything as well as the knower of everything. He is his own source. He is all-knowing, and he is the destroyer of time. Kala, that's the name for Shiva, too. Kala means time. He is the repository of all good qualities and the master of all sciences. He is the controller of matter and spirit, and the lord of the gunas. If you know anything about the gunas, then that will impress upon you the fact that the Lord is all-powerful, because he's beyond the gunas which everyone else march to. He is the cause of liberation from the cycle of birth and death, and the bondage which results in its continuance. Couldn't be much more exact than that. See? Saves you from the bondage of continual births and deaths. The first disease is rebirth. How many births do you want? Can you ever satiate yourself in this life? Has satisfaction ever come to you? Can you get enough of even an object? Or does the object leave you high and dry when it gets destroyed, or you get bored with it, or it gets stolen by a thief? The object is empty. Just listen to the Buddhists. They'll tell you. It's shunyata. Everything is without substance here. Without substance. At least they're a little more gracious than Sri Ramakrishna, who says it's a hard plum because it'll give you indigestion, he says. But without substance is a good philosophical view, you see. It convinces you, you see, well, I should just let it go. In fact, let's just try letting it go for a day or two. See? Renunciation is a word that kind of scares me, but my teacher says it's good, and the great renunciates are there, and maybe I should try it for a day or two. Maybe I should just let go of everything. Go about my work as an automaton. Like a ghoul or a ghost or a child, just going about his day, his or her day. And start to play with these concepts at least. Entertain them, that's what we've been saying, until they become your own way of living. And guess what? That satiation that you could never find is all of a sudden yours. You are satisfied with the self, in the self, by the self. Then you've got not a hug plum there, but a juicy apple, a juicy orange. Yogananda said to Nikola Tesla one day, I know how to get more juice out of my orange. Because Nikola Tesla was in his laboratory trying to work with matter and energy, light and everything. And Swamiji said, very good, but I know a way to get more juice out of my orange. Because Nikola Tesla was evidently a very moral person, he was high-minded. But Swamiji was beyond high-minded, he was no-minded. No mind, no matter. No matter, never mind. That's what my teacher used to say. You've gone beyond the mind, and matter doesn't matter to you. Nature is not your true nature, so it doesn't matter to you. You're in a high state, you're in a state of transcendence. Yet you still have this body that's being moved by the Mother of the Universe through the worlds of name and form. It's like a puppet on strings, Shri said. She just made me a puppet on strings. I felt like my body was a pillowcase, or a bunch of popsicle sticks tied together with string. Stick man. From Krishna's to the modern stick man. So, the cause of liberation from the cycle of birth and death and the bondage which results in its continuance. Why? Because basically this is a contemporary teaching now from an ancient ideology, the eight occult powers. Back in times, in different yugas, when people had more wherewithal spiritually, they could use the eight occult powers with more discretion. Now, they don't have that. They're not born with that spiritual discrimination. They've come in without it. And they just want power and pleasure. And they think they can get that out of nature by taking all the atoms out of a car, putting them together and blowing up 3/4 of the world. That's the way they're thinking. So that's this power of domination, which is one of the names of the occult powers. There you have it, right there, on this chart, on my left, your right. And it all comes from this statement of the father of yoga. His name was Patanjali. And he gave us the eight-limbed yoga probably back in around 100 AD. 100 to 200 AD. And of course there was yoga before him, but he was the one that systematized it in that age for us. Anyway, Swami Vivekananda, of course, studied the Raja Yoga system and left behind even a commentary, a simple commentary for us on Raja Yoga. So he came upon that sloka where Patanjali says, when a man rejects all superhuman powers, he then attains the rain cloud of virtues. You know, it's sort of like saying, give up your ego, as I was saying earlier, and then God takes over, you see. There's that contemporary saying, let go and let God, or something. You know, there's different ways people, even the Christians are putting it. You know, if you get rid of this ego, then you get this inner ruler, immortal, seated in your heart. They call it Antaryami. The inner ruler, immortal, seated in your heart. She takes over. And then you feel just motivated by higher power. You don't even move by your own will, or act by your own agency. And you're blissful and free of all the karmas that come. No praise, no blame can be. So, the entire quote here by Swamiji, herein lies the secret. Says Patanjali, the father of yoga, quote, when a man rejects all superhuman powers, then he attains the rain cloud of virtues. He sees God, unquote. He sees God, he becomes God, and helps others become the same. First you see, and then you know, I am that. I am my Father one. Be thee perfect as thy Father in heaven is perfect. You know, it would be the natural thing to do. You know, some beings there are that see God and want to remain separate, so they can enjoy the bliss of seeing God. That's what I mean. Holy Mother says it's so inscrutable here. There's so many different kinds of beings, and God is getting His work done through all of them, even the evil. So that's where the Atman is the same in quality and quantity, right? And you can't judge and criticize all that, but you have to discriminate. When they say don't judge, don't criticize, doesn't mean just go and hug Hitler, hug a tiger in the woods. Oh, I see the Atman and the tiger, you're so cute. Torn apart, you see. But it means that you must discriminate, but not judge, you see. And witness consciousness from a distance. Sri Krishna said, always look at Maya from a distance, never close up. The closer you get to it, the more it seems real, the more it sucks you in. Until you're lost for decades at a time, maybe lifetimes. And you wake up, will you stay awake? I've seen so many people turn back in the ocean of Maya who had a momentary awakening. So they didn't develop the wherewithal yet to keep themselves from drowning again, to keep themselves from being born again in ignorance. So while you're awake, develop some muscles in that gymnasium and become very sure of yourself. Courage of your convictions is a nice English phrase. Have the courage of your convictions. When you see that truth, commit to it, develop muscles around it that will keep you from falling out of that beautiful, peaceful, harmonious zone that you were in for a few days or a week or a month. See, it's called sattva. It's one of those gunas we talked about. He sees God, he becomes God, and helps others become the same. This is all I have to preach, Vivekananda says. Doctrines have been expounded enough. There are books by the millions, but oh, for an ounce of practice. Oh, for an ounce of practice. Who does it remind you of that I just spoke of a few minutes ago? That bucket.
Buddha.
Lord Buddha with that bucket that's collecting drops, you see, drops of retracted energy, stored up energy, so that he can last through this lifetime. He can gain enlightenment and devotee after he sits for 49 days, you see. That's going to take a lot of strength. He was building up his whole life to be able to do that in full sight of humanity at the time. He was 550 years prior to Jesus. I might as well say he was Jesus 550 years earlier, because those souls are all the same. Same in quantity, same in quality. Well, we can say that right now and intellectually entertain it, but they actually knew it. Oh, when will I be in the company of Gauranga, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and dance with them in ecstasy? There's one song in India that has that universal ideal. See? Let's throw that religious conventions out the window. Swamiji said, Sri Ramakrishna said, words like Christianity and Hinduism stand as positive barriers to mankind's spiritual progress. And Swamiji follows suit with saying, we must go beyond the Vedas, we must go beyond the Quran, we must go beyond the Gita, but not by throwing Quran, Bible, and Gita out the door, but by studying them deeply and finding out their secret. And the secret of those who taught them. So as far as he's concerned, that preaching, that's all I have to preach. Give up the 8 occult powers, get the rain cloud of virtues falling on you. Doesn't it sound like Dharma drops in a bucket, rain cloud of virtues? You want to catch some of those? So there you have them listed for your convenience. Some of them, there's all 8 of the Astabala Siddhas, but then I just put some of the Dharma Mega Samadhi that kind of counteract them. And you see there, on one side, right thinking leading to divine life and enlightenment. Wrong thinking leading to suffering and rebirth and ignorance. So we're proclaiming that these occult powers are something you should take with a grain of salt and be very, very careful of entering into. And I would say, I would put them in a different order for this age. They usually put anima first, which is like weightlessness. Like, oh, I think I can levitate, or something. People are thinking, that's an occult power. I think I can just, defy the law of gravity and and so forth. But yeah, like that's ever happened here. So, if you levitate, can't do it with your body, you get in there with airplane and you go up. Oh, I'm levitating. See, that's anima. Then, actually, I think I want to put some missiles on board that plane. See, load the fuselage with bombs. See, to protect myself. Yeah, I'll protect myself. Actually, I want to go over there and bomb some other country. See? And call it okay. Even bring God into it and say, God, is on my side. God doesn't have sides. He's undivided. Does that sound like he has boundaries? The knowers of God state that God is undivided. So what is all these boundaries and countries and borders and religions and variegation, differences everywhere? So let them exist, but don't let them exist here in your mind. I'm one with my brother from France, I'm one with my brother from England, I'm one with my brother from India, I'm one with my brother from Japan. There may be Japanese, French, and English and so forth, but here we're one. You see. Hold it in the mind as an ideal. Break down those barriers here. It's flying over on United Airlines, see? That's not such a pleasant thing, but I won't get into that. But there was this French steward who had a thick French accent. He was going around. I'd seen him before on the flight. Beautiful man, just so into his service and everything. And had this kind of queer look in his eye, kind of a half smile. I was just thinking how I could see Atman in that man and so forth. But I was having trouble seeing Atman in my seat partner. Because it wasn't showing very well there. It wasn't very respectful or peaceful. So I would say a new order for it, rather than levitation and weightlessness, which is anima. I would say let's go right to the source of today's problem. Warlike, domineering nature. It's one of the worst occult powers of all. And we've talked about selling guns but not selling bullets as a solution for the problem of guns. But that's really a half measure. We shouldn't even be thinking in terms of weapons that hurt anyone. We should just be thinking in terms of the power of consciousness. The power of consciousness will single out evil-minded people and eject them out of the herd. You don't have to kill them, put them in prison, or any of that. You have a higher consciousness. I say this because I teach in prisons. I go into Vedanta and actually teach this to incarcerated people, men and women who are suffering in there. And I see the limitations, let's say, and even the faults of the prison system today. Well, there's going to be faults with any system. I mean, you can't just be a critical person, but you can be a person that gives positive suggestions to these solutions. So we have to look at this in terms of our domineering nature, as Americans particularly, I'm saying. But as Europeans in general, we're very warlike for 2,000 years. Even our religion is marched by war. But you have recent examples like Gandhi, and you have ancient examples like Buddha and Buddhism that marched across the planet without lifting a finger, what to speak of lifting a sword or firing a gun. They did it successfully without violence. And you have no guilt or no remorse when you join a religion like that. You can't, with any good conscience, join Christianity nowadays because it's in bed with politics. Or become a part of a diocese in Rome because it's been there with the Caesars and so forth, next to it, all that time, with riches and power, the bloody Church of England in chains of history. How, in good conscience, could you join something like that if you were a conscientious person who was sensitive and wanted to practice nonviolence? So this is not my forte, war, politics, and all that. But nonviolence is, so I have to bring it into the picture. Been nonviolent all my life, been vegetarian most of my life. I won't even want to hurt animals, see. You let them be. There's other food you can eat. So we don't want to put our religion into the cooking pot. as Vivekananda said, because that's what happened to the Hindus. He said their vegetarianism got so strict that the religion became in the cooking pot. So there's extremes to any way that you want to kind of avoid. But this discrimination that you want to use to bring about certain solutions ought to be introduced to the society and all the societies so that life can be bettered, actually bettered for people. And we know that altruism has its drawbacks. There have been a lot of people who have tried to use it, and in a sense, you can't really improve the world. It's always going to suffer. Vivekananda actually made that statement. You can feed one side of the world, and you'll find out the other side is starving. Then you run to that side and start feeding this side of the world, and this side will start starving. It's the way the world is, and you have to accept it, or else you'll get crazy and old before your time. Who said that? Crosby, Stills, Nash. So, you're living this conventional life, and you're allowing these occult powers to march for you. And so the teaching here is that we have to point them out in today's light. So I'm doing that with warlike, domineering kind of nature. So now, across the board, of course, would be non-violence and peaceful. Over here, selfish and covetous. What is the second yama of yoga? In Sanskrit first. Asteya. What's it mean? Non-covetousness. What is the Shvetashvatara Upanishad saying in its first opening slokas? Do not covet the goods of other beings. Follow the ordinances of the scriptures to the letter, and you won't be the creator of karma for yourself and your society and your family. But you'll have to pay off later for killing, for being selfish, for not feeding others, taking all food to yourself, taking all pleasure to yourself. That's just selfish living. That's ego in charge. And you may not be that kind of person yourself, but if you're living in a society that is, then of course you're going to be subject to the karma of it. That's why you're suffering and you're having misgivings and second thoughts and quitting jobs and not working for evil bosses anymore and on and on. Or maintaining a job that is hurting the environment just for the sake of the money it brings and security. So without sacrifice, spiritual heaven is not going to be able to live. And who's going to be the first to sacrifice? No one that's crucified. The one that's poisoned. So these are the great beings that step out and say the truth. Then they get the karma for that. But that's a better karma to get, to stay free, than to be caught in these rounds of birth and death for many lifetimes without stating the truth, without knowing the truth, and without standing up for the truth. And Vedanta gives you the truth. This is for sure, for certain. There's nothing like it. We say Vedanta, we mean pretty much Mother India and her non-violent stance and her selfless stance, her non-covetous stance. She's the mother of renunciation. She's the mother of giving up the world. Not of taking it to yourself. Granting to Caesar what is Caesar's. Christ got those ideas from India most likely. Not that they weren't a part of his own soul. Next is jealous and meddlesome. And these I'm listing, you see, right out of here. Anima, Lagima, Vyapti, Prakamya, Mahima, Ishitva, Vashitva, and Kamalakshayita. These are the 8 occult powers, Asta, Bala, Siddhis, that Krishna warned against, that Sri Ramakrishna warned against. So what does it say here? The 8 occult powers are like crow droppings alongside the path. Anyone want a helping of crow droppings? No. Oh, thank you. Sri Ramakrishna hit that nail on the head. Like the world is a hog plum. He tends to do that. Every strike of his hammer is right on the head of the nail. So listen to him and follow him. Across the board, gracious and unattached. Gracious and indrawn. Gracious and indrawn, like Divine Mother, like Holy Mother. Loving and compassionate and so forth. That's the opposite of an occult power. These are the rain cloud of virtues. See, some of them. When you give up the 8 occult powers and make sure that you're very clear and very hard on yourself to get rid of these, there's no traces of these left in you, then you get this, Father Yoga says. And this is the difference between a worldly person and a realized person. Or between a deluded soul and a soul who's sincerely striving for truth. So, there it is, as clear as day. Look at it, apply it when necessary, and know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Reach the goal of human existence in this very lifetime, and never look back. Fourth there is materialistic and possessive. We think that matter is everything. Like I said yesterday, scientists, my teacher said, scientists think that matter is indestructible. Well, that might be a clue to them glomming onto it so much as if it were the only reality. The physical world is all that exists for them, right? They won't entertain any ideas beyond the physical world. They'll think it's Deepak Chopra's woo-woo. Anytime anyone starts talking about spiritual things, the scientists come down on it, most of them. So, in terms of materialism and so forth, the teacher said the scientists are saying matter is indestructible. But he said, but it's not indestructible. It's not destructible either. It's unoriginated. Wow. I mean, it's not like an argument between whether you can destroy matter or not. That's amongst the intellectual ego, right? They can argue about that for the next 100 years or 200 years. Like hens cackling around the new hatching of insects on the barnyard floor. Or you could say, gee, maybe I should listen to Gaudapada, one of the great souls. They're saying it didn't have a beginning, it doesn't have an end. It's not a matter of whether you can destroy it or not. It was never there in the first place. It's unoriginated. It's sort of like saying it's all empty, isn't it? It doesn't have any substance. So why am I obsessing with it so much? Why don't I try and let it go? Like Christ did, like Buddha did, like Krishna did. Why didn't I follow that track for a while? Curious and manipulative of nature and its powers. Across the board, by the way, from materialist and possessive, was God-loving and unattached. They don't love the world, they love God. Why? Because you should love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, thy whole soul, and thy whole mind. And all else will be added unto you later. But you're trying to get everything added unto you first, and leaving God till later. The teacher made other statements about that too. Swami Shishyananda said, people love the world. If you ask them why they love the world, because it gives me everything I desire. So he said, what about God? I said, I'll love God when he comes and helps me. But God will never come into your TV set. God will never come on your football field. God will never come into your bowling alley. I'm quoting him. He used to say, not television, God vision. So, do you love God or do you love the world? Well, if you love the world, admit it, okay, good luck with that, you say. But don't be hypocritical. See, I want to love God, but you're waiting for him to come to your climes, your living room, your family of fighting siblings who aren't taught the Dharma. You're expecting God to come where things are not pure. God is purity itself. So you must go to that atmosphere where God is, that's pure, and then cut yourself in that image, shouldn't you? Got to be peaceful house, be peaceful life. I have to be peaceful when I go out the door to my job and when I come home. And if I'm not peaceful when I come home, at least I have to come back to a peaceful home. So God-loving and unattached. That's the first four of these. Let's take the fifth and have our break. Curious and manipulative of nature and its powers. That's science. That's the worldly. Very curious about nature, but we can say there's not one secret thing in nature. Not one hidden secret thing. The hidden secret is in that being that's behind nature. That's the great secret that nobody ever sees. You've seen nature for lifetimes, and you're still after it. And you're still rediscovering new discoveries. But Ecclesiastes said there's nothing new under the sun. Nothing new. You discovered the atomic particle thousands of years ago, and now you're rediscovering it. But you just had to, since you were so focused on matter, you had to actually get a mechanism called an electron microscope together by gathering the powers of nature and put it on a splinter of matter and see that it was, made of vibrating particles. But what happened after you actually proved it to yourself through mechanisms of nature? You wouldn't believe it. If you had believed it, you would have given it up, because you'd see that objects were empty of substance. What the Buddhists have been telling you for 2,500 years. See, you're not making the right conclusion even after you prove it to yourself. With the mechanisms that you believe in. You won't listen to the seers. Okay, do it your own way. I did it my way. Well, I'm sorry, Frank Sinatra's not allowed amongst the spiritual people. You can't do it your way. There's only one way to get to enlightenment, and that's by enlightenment, realizing Brahman. And that's going to come about by knowing yourself as Brahman, through the Atman, the indivisible soul of all beings. Across the board, from curious and manipulative about nature and its powers, is transcendent and respectful of nature, which is how I started off this class and how I'll end this first half. You should move through the neighborhood, through people, through crowds, through buildings, through trees, through animals and birds and everything, deifying them. And these are all manifestations of Brahman. This should change your thinking process. Sayonara be single, you should know the truth. So start trying to see through that eye instead of these two. These two are defective. Why? Because they're outward going only. They don't see inwards to the truth. So here we'll have our break and come back and finish up the last four slokas of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad.
And for our audience, we're going to try and stay online, but at one point we will have to go off and then we'll come back.
Steer with us through these technical difficulties.